Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 23, Futureproofing NEXT, Futureproofing Now. And we will get started in just about a minute. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 23, Futureproofing NEXT, Futureproofing Now, the new frame of innovation plus plus, 5 levels of change, innovation, and transformation. And we are very excited that we are at the 23rd episode of this season. We are rounding up till the end of the year, and it's really exciting to have such a great community. And today is going to be conversation plus interaction. So get your questions ready. So we're ready for the next slide, and I'd like to introduce Sean Moffitt in just a moment, but I want to start with a question. It's a quote. Someone once asked me, "Why do you always insist on taking the hard road?" And I replied, "Why do you assume I see 2 roads?" What I love about this is that we're going to be spending a lot of time today with categorization and putting things into boxes and trying to make sense of some things. But also we are in the midst of a season where we really realize that things either A, are not binary. So you can't necessarily see only 2 roads. And secondly, you can't really figure out that the person you're talking to sees the same road that you see, because that's really a matter of perspective and anchoring bias and all kinds of other ways that we approach choices in business. So today is going to be about how we view this. We have been very interested this year in why business innovation had to accelerate so fast, but why we were so ill-equipped to do it. And to put a selfless plug in, this topic of the roads and the black and white and the either or was the subject of a piece that I just wrote on Medium for the Gray Swan Guild, which is a sense-making group that that Sean and I both work with. So encourage you to think about the fact that not everything should be binary, despite the fact we'll be spending a lot of time on categorization. So let me introduce Sean Moffitt, Futureproofing NEXT co-founder. And we not only see the managing director with me as also managing director of Futureproofing NEXT, but he is a 5-tool corporate innovation champion. And it's going to be exciting for the 2 of us to talk today about how we view these categories and the types of innovation so we can all make sense of this. So welcome, Sean.
Hey, Andrea, how are you? It's getting cold up here in Canada today. So if you see me shivering, there's a reason. But it's funny, as we looked into this topic, this could really be a full book unto itself, couldn't it? Like, I think books have been writing about, innovation types. So, compressing this down to its essence is going to be interesting today.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to the questions that everybody has. One of the things that we were saying is we spent this year, the pandemic year, really trying to codify these models and applying them and testing them and reworking them so that people could really start to make some sense of this new world. And so one of the things we love for people to do in these kinds of sessions is, if you don't mind, just kind of chime in on the chat. Who are you? Where are you from? I just got back from a month in Denmark, which was kind of surreal, and back in San Francisco now. So this is, exciting and glad to be back with the community.
So we did kind of on at least the first topic, because some people might rightly say, well, why go about categorizing innovation? It's been done before. What's the need to do it now? And we independently, separately, kind of went into our bubbles and decided, what's the real reason why we're doing this, Andrea? And I think you came up with 6 reasons. I came up with 6. So why don't we pivot to that? Here's 3 of yours. Why don't you tell the audience why you think it's about time we look at a different categorization?
Everybody knows I'm sick of the cliches of this pandemic, like the new normal. I really feel like we've come up with a lot of cliches, but at the same time, we've come up with some new thinking, and people have been tracing how quickly change has happened. So everybody probably knows this, but one of my favorite lines from this week has been, why not live every year as if it's a pandemic? If we're capable of this sense of urgency and we're capable of understanding that we need to move faster, why not do it more often and have that sense of urgency? We used to call it burning platforms. So that's one of the reasons that I think this is important, is if we understand this better, we can get good at it and apply it, rinse and repeat a lot better. Number two is, and people who know me from this community know that I rail against Horizon 1, 2, 3 as a limiting mindset, because so often we've seen that when you categorize, you also limit. And so, Horizon 3 never happens in many companies that we've worked with, because it's always in the future, and the future never happens. So that's another reason that categorizing is good, because you can jump to something else. If you're at a stopping point, you can jump somewhere different so that you can actually make progress and not just keep putting things in H3 and not funding them. And the third thing is that it's not our fault that we're not good at some of these things we'll be talking about, because honestly, we were shocked to realize that a lot of these terms haven't even come up. They're within the last 10, 15 years, that a lot of these concepts are pretty new. So we encourage people to understand we weren't taught how to jump cut. We were taught how to grow and predict and have 5-year plans, but this jump cut is something new. We weren't taught to future proof, and you'll hear a lot about that during our conversation, what that really means. And we weren't taught how to co-create and collaborate. And there's some people in the community that are on the call today that we've co-created and collaborated with and learned how to do it really well, and got lots of great metrics around it. So I think that's part of it. Back to you, Sean. What do you think?
Well, I think, and it's even when we started writing our book, Andrea, we went to a couple of people that really knew their way around books, and the moment we said, well, it's a book about innovation, we're still in the early days, and people just groaned. It's like, oh, not another book about innovation, please. And so I think there's the term innovation. I always say the term innovation is like love. It's like Netflix pivoting to a new business model is the same appreciation as like that packaged goods manufacturer that's releasing its 28th flavor that's called raspberry. And both of those things are innovation. And so because it has no definition and no boundaries, it's kind of like this amorphous term. We thought we should define it better. I think from an expectation standpoint, there are various models out there that do a good job of talking about types of innovation. There are various models that talk about levels of innovation. And I think from an expectation standpoint, are we, when you go to your manager and say, I'm in charge of innovation now, do you want to take the company in a completely different direction? Or do you want to work on this small little venture over here that may produce something interesting? Those are two fundamentally different things. We thought we should define those parameters. And I think from an application standpoint, we have seen, you had just mentioned it, Andrea, some of these terms are completely different. If you looked at a research and development department in the 1990s, they were focused pretty much on product. And we know that there is a much bigger gamut of things to deal with now in innovation than just strictly product. And we're going to talk about some of those today. What about your next 3 reasons, Andrea?
Well, I think that we've made a lot of progress in the last, say, 10 years with people who wrote great things and did great things with innovation metrics. It used to be everything was ROI or IRR and EBITDA. And after that realization that we needed some metrics for innovation, then, we checked that box. Well, now we think that there's another layer that we'll talk about today, which is in a vacuum. If you don't know where you're going, any map will do. So, if you don't exactly know what the goal is, then you just can measure innovation metrics. So we've done 2 things here. One is contextualize it within a set of options that a company has to do. Now there's so many great innovative ideas on the table usually. What are you measuring? Like, what's better than what? How do you set the priorities? And also beyond innovation metrics is this thing we call future-proofing metrics, which is how resilient are we? How adaptable are we? How well are we equipped to respond to something that wasn't anywhere in our scenario planning, wasn't anywhere in our models, and be able to really future-proof? So that's one. Number 2 is that we really had a great year. We had something called In the Author's Studio, and we are so grateful to the people that we interacted with that we call peers. We learned a lot this year about, first of all, culture. So from Tendai Vicky, who wrote a book called Pirates of the Navy, we learned that privateers are really important. You need to have corporate support. If an innovation is going to happen well and be successful, you can't just be a pirate. We used to like that. I live in Silicon Valley. We used to think we were misbehaving and that was cool all the time. But now it's like, if you don't have the support from the Queen to go out on your mission, probably not going to have it come back and be fully appreciated back in the homeland. Psychological safety, we really love Amy Edmondson's work, and we had her on in one of our webcasts as well. She's done such great work with, how do you create a culture where you're allowed to disagree with people and bring in new factors that aren't in your first plan. We loved Matteo Rizzi's book called Talents and Rebels, where he talks about, there's some people who are really good at starting things. And there's someone in the audience, in the podcast today in our group, that taught me about this. Not everybody's good at starting things. Not everybody's good at implementing it once it's thought of. And so Matteo talks about the talents and the rebels. Like, you don't necessarily want to have the rebel on the board, or maybe you do, but you need people to be questioning, and you need people to be executing, and they need to sit in the same room and break bread together, for sure. And then the last thing is Pascal Coppens, who we've been really lucky to be in an informal think tank with. And he wrote a great book called China's New Normal, whereas we used to think, and the United States has changed a lot in terms of IP and ownership and invention. Well, now it turns out that what China's really good at, which is speed, agility, ecosystem, and customer centricity, that new normal is actually setting a new pace for innovation. So back to you, Sean.
I think it leads just to the last three that I came up with, strangely enough. Sometimes our stuff does mesh with each other, Andrea. If you look at large companies and scale-ups, which is really our purview here, startups pretty much have it easy. They only have to focus on that one thing and make sure that one thing happens as good as it can. If you're in a larger company, you got a lot of different things that you have to manage. And time again, we've looked at portfolios of companies' innovations, and as much as different needs need to be cultivated, it tends to be one crop always prevails. And oftentimes in big companies, it's the stuff that you can actually achieve and maybe is a little bit more risk-free. So we think categorizing innovation better and forcing people to go, look, you don't have anything in this camp over here, you need to do something about that, is helpful. We've kind of like our sub-tagline, our sub-tagline for our book. It's really, it's innovation for the 2020s. And as much as we're going to share some thoughts in terms of what people have done before us, really, if you look at the pace of technology, our ambition as businesses, our human need to just get ahead of things, and our ability to configure things, those have drastically changed over the last 15 years. And so, what we're going to codify here really is for today and hopefully the next decade before AI or something blows us away in the 2030s. And then finally, and this pivots to our next few slides, there's a complete gap in understanding. If you are still doing SWOT analysis, that may be fine for certain situations, but essentially some of those tools were born in the 1950s or 60s. We've improved our understanding over time in terms of what creates values for company, and I think that's reflected in some of the stuff that we're going to talk about here. And Andrea, I know, innovation is not a new word, whether it's Darwin and classification of species and kind of going broader in terms of, like species innovate over a period of time, or maybe the father of innovation, Edison, what's Edison, 1890s, I guess. We've been talking about innovation for a long period of time. So it's like, why would we need to define something new? And I think I'll get your thoughts on these three terms. We know customer experience. Pretty much people were not talking about customer experience year 2000. They just weren't. It could have been customer service. It could have been resolve complaints, but they weren't talking about customer experience. And they certainly weren't talking about business models. We have a number of people. You mentioned Tendai Vicky, certainly as part of a group that, really early 2000s brought to the table kind of the new age of business models and how we could configure things, not just invent them. And then finally, I think even more recently, we're looking at a world where you just cannot go it alone. You have to partner up and do things with other people. And this is a pretty recent phenomenon too. So I think for those three different reasons, we need a different classification system, right, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I came to Silicon Valley to run a software company, a software as a service company that was a platform company that took lean startup and tried to apply it to large companies. And that's how we got our, huge insights into all of this. And one of the things that was interesting was, it was the first time in 2013-ish that we were using the term customer success, because it used to be product success. And, if you think of Mad Men and the fact that you put a product in market and then you compete that product against another product, and then, General Motors goes against Ford, and which product is going to be better. So that focus was so embedded in our minds that it was really a big twist to go, wait a minute, what's going on from the customer's perspective? And to be honest, the experience economy and some of the work that Joe Pine did, just understanding that experience was a thing, just like brand had been a thing and still is probably a thing. So that's one thing that I think is really interesting. Second is in terms of the business models. Yeah, I think the business model canvas and all of that work really let people see it visually. And that's hopefully also in our book. We let people see visually what they're doing in a new way. And if you have a new map, you have a new lexicon. So I think that's a second. And I think that, we realized that this global world that we were all living in quickly, in your book, Wiki Brands, from the 2010s, Sean, really opened my eyes up to that. Like we were all living in Wikiland. It was, you could be in a garage in the backwaters of any place and be doing commerce with anybody anywhere in the world. You could be 12 years old or 85 years old and have the same advantage in the world of digital. So this notion of network effect that we all needed was suddenly democratized. It was suddenly in the hands of everybody. So I think that makes a lot of sense that these terms are new, but they're super important. And of course, they're the pillars and foundation of what we're about to talk about.
And we thought before we took a step forward, maybe we'd take a step backward, right? We don't want to map over kind of the great work that's come before us. And truly, a lot of times when people try to start a movement like we're trying to start with Futureproofing Next, they go, wow, you have to crap on the movement that came on before you. And we're really not, I think. And we wanted to reflect some of that respect by actually looking at what's being looked at previously in terms of classification systems. So we'll spend like 30 seconds per slide here, and we've done it numerically. I feel a little bit like the Count from Sesame Street. I'll do my worst accent here, Andrea. It's like, we are going to share 2 types of innovation first, and then we will move to 10 types of innovation. How'd I do?
That was so bad.
Okay.
But like highly entertaining.
Okay.
Highly entertaining. And if you, by the way, had done that and then reversed it and gone like Jeopardy, like who was that I just did, I would not have guessed the Count. But now that you mentioned it, really love it. Really love it. And
that's a true sense of awkwardness.
That was good. I like that you tried.
Higher audience. But we thought numerically it was interesting to go through. Okay, well, there are 3 prominent types of innovation that I've run across in my journeys. Incremental versus radical, and Christensen oftentimes gets reflected with kind of being the inventor of either disruptive or radical innovation, these 2 different binary types of innovation. It's either the stuff we know and the stuff that's crazy out there that we don't know. Ambidextrous, which was kind of like, there's innovation that makes your trains run on time, and there's the innovation that takes you into a completely new world. And then Kim and Moburn came along kind of early 2000s with Blue Ocean and said, look, everybody's fighting over this red ocean pie. Why don't you go to this blue ocean pie where things are easy to compete with and not as many people are chasing for the same slice of pie. So those are the 2 types, Andrea. Any reflections on these 3 that came before us?
Yeah, they're 2 great ones. First of all, we just did this future-proofing sprint, and this is also a shameless promotion. We're doing something called Futureproofing You, which is of course a virtual course that we've put together that we're launching next year. So we field tested a bunch of the information from that, and part of what you need is a context for what future-proofing is all about. And one of the things that's interesting is ambidextrous innovation, for instance, doesn't really address future trends and the fact that you need to have agency over the future. So what's the future you want to create? Whereas ambidextrous is more about how you do it. This is sort of like what you want to be doing in the first place. So we are lucky that we can build on that, on what Tushman and O'Reilly did in terms of like not just left brain, right brain, this binary thing, but also as the future and this dynamic of what should we be doing? I mean, we have the luxury now of going, it's not just do it A or B way, but what is this future we're trying to create? What is a hospital tomorrow going to be? And so that's good. And I think the Blue Ocean one, very briefly, it talks a lot about Cirque du Soleil. And so when we were in Denmark doing this sprint to field test some of the concepts, they're saying, Blue Ocean strategy is still part of the books that you are exposed to. And it's so classic in that book to look at Cirque du Soleil, and just that week they went bankrupt. And so it was this perfect example of, here we are. And one of our colleagues, Doyle Bueller, wrote about this as well recently, that, it's kind of ironic that the most innovative company that was written about as the textbook case in innovation just went bankrupt. because they didn't keep up. This is my take. They didn't keep up with the new skill of agility to be able to future-proof, to be able to see the future trend and act nimbly enough to do kind of what Disney did. And we'll talk about that later.
Interesting. All right, we're going to move to 3 types, and things evolved a little bit. Some of these years are a little bit further on than the 3 models I just mentioned. And I think there's an appreciation of all 3 of these, that innovation became a little bit more nuanced. Like, you just couldn't put it into 2 camps. And so the middle one I'll focus on, core adjacent transformation. This tends to be the consulting models. Most of the top 4 or 5 consultancies, whoever they are, they tend to like this one a lot. There's the stuff that you do in the short term, the midterm, and the long term, and they have different versions of that, but certainly this is one of the models that was put forward. Christensen also put forward an interesting one. He took his model one step further as well. So there are 3 types of innovation here, but Andrea, you want to chime in on maybe the middle model here?
Yeah, I think that the only thing I'd like to say is that we're not trying to bash this at all, but mentally, what we've seen so often is as soon as something ends up in that thing on the top right, it doesn't get in the budget.
Yeah.
And that's not anyone's fault. It's just, you always start at square one, but sometimes we don't think you should start at square one. Sometimes we think you should start at square 3. So it's just an anchoring bias. And once again, we're not arguing against, God forbid, McKinsey and BCG and others, but we do think we have seen too many times that we never get to the, that H3, the horizon 3, because it's always, it's out of reach and it's therefore out of the budget.
I still remember working in a paper plant in my early career, Andrea, and for a bath tissue product. And that Horizon 3 innovation that was, let's produce a new plant and produce radically new stuff. I worked on the brand for about 2.5 years. That never slid anything closer to being adjacent or core, right? Like, it kept on being like, let's deal with that nightmare somewhere down the road. So just adding complete evidence to your argument here. All right, so we get a little bit more nuance and we go, oh my Lord, there's 4 types. And probably the most popular classification system always has 4. Everybody loves boxes, and 4 boxes of that. And so Christensen has been built on by many other people. I think Pisano, Gary Pisano, and even Greg Sattel, both of our colleagues, have built around 4 types of innovation. And I think it reflects the fact that, yes, there's incremental and this transformative stuff, but there's also other things that play with different variables. And so, and on the competing side, there's an appreciation that marketing has a role to play, and the total company has a role to play with innovation as well. This is just not a product and process focused type of deal. And so, Andrew, any reactions to the 4 types of innovation?
No, I think we should move right on.
Okay. This one is not often quoted, but I know we spend a lot of time thinking about future work, people, leadership, culture. Jacob Morgan came up with one 5 years ago that said, look, yes, we're focused on the customer and what we can do to be better from a positioning standpoint against competitors and how we can partner up. But there's also the employee and there's also public innovation. And so this gets into a couple of the things around, well, where could we take this that could improve internally and hopefully the triple bottom line of the world. So so that was 5 types. We get to 6 and 7 types. Robert Garish came up with stuff that reflected some stuff around open innovation and value innovation, which I think improved our understanding of where innovation goes. And I put it up here because Drucker's the best. I mean, when his stuff still lives 35 years after he invented it, it probably says something. And he had come up with the 7 sources of innovation. And then finally, I really want to give this one some press because I think when I was searching and wondering and thinking, how do we innovate better when I was a client, and then now that I'm doing our own thing here, Doblin and Larry Keeley's 10 types of innovation was really transformative for me. It codified and classified, yes, there are 10 different types. Yes, they fall into different camps. And he took it one step further and said, look, we've looked at the effectiveness of all these different types. And as much as people are frequently dealing with product innovation, the real traction and volume that you get is from network, profit model. Anything that's peacock blue on this grid tends to give you a better return. So any thoughts on this one, Andrew, before we move to our own version of what innovation?
Only one thought, which is we're doing a shout out to Greg Sattel. He just was saying in the chat that he got half a plug. And so thank you for being with us today, Greg Sattel. We love your book, Mapping Innovation. We love all your work. And we're just hoping we can lure you into a full session with us. So we just wanted to kind of sprinkle some dust on that and invite you to do a whole session with us, kind of a back and forth on what's going on in innovation. So
I
yes.
will give Greg a vanity plug too, because as I was looking at types of innovation, if you type in types of innovation, at least in my Toronto, Canada world, what comes up first? Greg Sittel. Greg Sittel. So
yes,
just
it's all about Greg.
Greg Sittel enough. Maybe that's a full plug. By a very good book, by the way. So our challenge that we were left with is, how do we include all types of innovation in the 2020s, right? How do we marry both the type of innovation and level of innovation? Because we've seen those exposed differently in the models that we've just presented. A lot of these models are very descriptive and explanatory. A lot of academics came up with these models, not surprisingly, so that's their purview. We're much more practitioner focused. So how can these be actionable and looking forward? And then finally, what is going to be reflective of the new pace and rules of innovation? Myself and Andrea don't believe horizons kind of exist, and we'll actually point to some evidence that comes on. But we tasked ourselves with this challenge, and we think we've produced something that's maybe an improvement. We'll talk about the new rules just really quickly. This is research I don't think we've shared with anybody ever. So here's your proprietariness. We asked a question in our seminal research survey last year. Versus 5 years ago, how much faster is your innovation development process from idea to customer? 200% faster. I mean, that's versus 5 years ago. So it's not only the world that's changing, it's inside companies that's changing faster too. Andrea, anything on this one?
No, I say we go through a lot of these because we have a lot to cover, and I think this is self-explanatory.
I agree. This one I do want to focus on though, because it's like your horizon model. So we asked people incremental, adjacent, and breakthrough innovation. This was before we even codified the way we've done so in this presentation. And we asked them, well, how long from idea to market? And incremental goes real quick. 4 months at a time, you can get something to market, particularly if you're digital. Adjacent, trying to expand into either new markets or chase a different audience or product, 10 months. And breakthrough, this is probably the most surprising one. Breakthrough innovation for people was deemed to be about 18 months. Wow.
Yeah.
Right? So like back in my Procter & Gamble days, you would plan for breakthrough innovation 10 years, maybe 5 if you're lucky, 18 months. So, putting stuff in Horizon 3 to us just doesn't make too much sense anymore. And I know Google always gets good plaudits here in terms of, well, Google spends 70% of the time doing the incremental stuff and 20 on like the adjacent stuff and 10 on the future stuff. I even think Google's out of date here, Andrea. I think certainly in what we learned from our panel, people are spending almost equal amounts of time on each, which is interesting, I find.
Well, I think there are two really important things here, and I don't want to spend a lot of time because we have so much to present, but we even know someone at Google who used to serve 300,000 meals per day because that was the job of that particular person's life. And it wasn't 18 months that they had, it was like 18 days to say, okay, with headquarters, et cetera, closing, that's not your job anymore. What is your job if that used to be your job? So it was kind of like a switch. It's like the train that's going down the track and suddenly you have to like change it to the other track. So that's the other reason to stop thinking horizons, because it's like you could sit there worrying about, oh, do you think we should? Well, we have 17 more months to figure out what to do about the fact that we're not going to be serving meals anymore, or get with this future-proofing program.
And to support your earlier point, Andrea, it's like we have seen in the pandemic, there's actually a study by Twilio that said, digital transformation for certain industries like healthcare, retail, 7 years of progress has happened in a matter of months. And so if we've seen anything that people can do breakthrough innovation, they can do it well. It's been this year. And then finally, a pretty busy slide here, but I think there's a lot of really good grist here in terms of supporting your argument. It used to be pretty much 20 years ago, you're doing innovation, great. You're focused on product, maybe on process. And then we'll try to make sense with what you're producing by making it reflect well with the customer. Such a larger gamut of things to consider as innovators. I truly think, corporate innovators the good ones need to be the most talented people in the world, because they got to understand these 12 things. And so their resources are spread across these 12 things, and certainly what they're producing could be in any one of these 12 camps. So it's not your grandfather or grandmother's innovation anymore. So anyway, we're going to pivot to what we're calling innovation plus plus. We've put the plus plus beside things in our book that demonstrate, look, we're going to root it in something that you know, but this is completely different. So we got 5 levels, 24 types. Anything you want to talk about before we reveal, Andrea?
No, but this stuff is what's coming up is going to be on the midterm.
Yes, we'll tell
Yes.
people at the end.
Yes, this is our original thinking. We've spent the year trying to figure out what's going on. We were kind of lucky because we were homebound for a lot of the time. So we're doing virtual sprints with teams and companies, but it gave us the time to really question ourselves and go heads down. So what you're about to see, drum roll, is definitely original thinking that we've done, that we've invested in to try to help corporate teams grow faster through innovation.
So we're going to atomize each one of these in a little bit, but there's 2 things that are going on here. Actually 3 things if you consider it. We've looked at 24 types of core types of innovation. So when you go to your boss and say, I want to innovate, could be one of these 24 things, right? We've further categorized them into 6 different categories that may make understanding them a little bit better. We've then said, well, typically there's a level of innovation attached to each one of these things. Not all the time. Sometimes continuous improvement may have more than 1 bar, but it tends to be pretty much have a certain characteristic. And the time span of these, like, we resisted trying to put ourselves into a specific time span because, as we've seen through this pandemic, big business network model changes. You look at the vaccine development that's going on right now. We've been able to build a global kind of ecosystem of people focused on a really big challenge. And some of us don't think it's going fast enough, but it's like, wow, they're going to be able to get a vaccine done and out to people in a year's span of time. So this is no longer 10-year thing. So we're going to take it one step further. We thought, all right, we called this webcast 5 levels of innovation. We should probably give you the money slide that speaks to the 5 different levels. We've got continuous and optimized. We've got incremental and differentiated. We got adjacent, diversification, breakthrough, next generation, and holistic change. This is the stuff of sci-fi. We're reaching a new global plane. And each one of these has a different focus, a different environment, and different characteristics. I won't go through all of them, but it's essentially, I think, the known version of the innovator's world. If you're a conventional innovator, you tend to play in the first 3 buckets. And I think what we're adding to the mix is, when we're talking business models and we're talking ecosystems, we're really adding a 4th and 5th component into how we look at levels of innovation. Andrea, any thoughts on this?
Well, I think that we should absolutely acknowledge that a new oxymoron has just been uttered by Sean Moffitt, which is conventional innovator. We have reached the point where innovation has come of age to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So this is like a next world problem is, now we know the basics because we are conventional innovators. So I really love that. I think it's why don't you copyright that?
Well, what the corollary of a conventional innovator is, Andrea, because I presume they're not doing enough because they're conventional. We need to move beyond.
An unconventional dinosaur? Is that
or a future proofer, right?
There you go. Yes. Boom.
That's the reason.
Okay, much better.
As we did, but so that's it. We thought we would tear each of these different types of innovation. Andrea, you covered off product innovation. We'll do the back and forth here. What's your thought?
So the first one is, and I don't know if my slide comes next or not, but product innovation. First of all, we talk about it in terms of, for people listening to this as a podcast, there's continuous improvement, there's new product extension, base product overhaul, and new to the world breakout. And one of the things that we want to talk about is some examples of some of these things. These are observations in each of the realms. So for instance, we have noticed that product innovation is also sometimes platform-ish. And it can be B2B-ish. And so one of the things that we wanted to talk about is the way that Amazon now, first of all, it used to be that words were the big deal. And we just got some points for neurodiversity. Yes, you're welcome. We are excited about this company we're going to talk about. So with Amazon, what we're noticing is the same way that in my day, in early days, it was like packets of information or compression technologies, and in technology platforms, you sort of had to know a bit of the background of what you could do. Well, now video and the cloud and video and the ability for basically anyone to be a television channel, including someone in a garage, using Amazon's back end and some of the developer network that's surrounding that, it's a big deal. There's going to be a lot of growth there. And we think that the product itself is going to change. So although it's a platform, we think this is a really exciting world of product-based innovation where a whole new infrastructure is being created for us to all be able to develop products on top of. We've talked before about Solstrom. I really love the fact that someone's figured out a way to do. I know that Steve Wozniak just did one too, but blockchain, to really make some sense out of blockchain, so you can explain it to your mother and make some sense and make some dollars out of it, dollars and cents, I guess. So Solstrom is it's a product that allows people to monetize their carbon credits in a blockchain, in a ledger that was figured out by a friend of us, Kareem Jabbar, and a team in Denmark. And we're super excited about a product that takes a technology that is a buzzword to many and makes it practical, makes a difference, and equips a lot of people in a huge ecosystem to be able to have products that connect. We really love Canva, not just because it turned me from the worst graphic designer in the world to like a slightly better one, but because it's actually not a graphic design program. It's not like Unsplash where you just get a free picture or a free graphic. It's actually a tribe. And we think that product-based tribes are really important because it's continuous learning plus product plus relationships. And you're in this kind of relationship with the product that makes you very, it's almost like the product has a personality, and the product has a dimension to it that products didn't used to be able to have. So there's product plus community, and we really love that about Canva, and we see that happening more and more. And then yes, neurodiversity. I mean, not everybody does well, and we know that a lot of kids are having a hard time with school, and not everybody does well with Zoom, and it's really kind of this uncanny valley feeling of where am I and what am I doing, and am I have I seen Sean, or have I seen a picture of Sean? But Ultranauts is really exciting to us as a product because it's originally from neurodiversity research out of MIT, but they productized it first as a way to allow people with different, people with autism is a large part of what they mean by neurodiversity. And not only to be able to serve them, but yet there's more. The product aspect of this is that they developed a product that is a talent pool for people with autism. And so you get to have a product that allows the people to perform well because it's allowing them to contribute in a way that's not necessarily the non-diverse neuro profile, but also supposedly the people who are part of this talent pool have been outperforming people, and supposedly they've outperformed people from like Capgemini or, in some of these programs, because the tasks that they're given are well suited to their learning style, their capabilities, and their interaction. So we think this is a really new area of product development, is to do products that are neurodiverse based on what we know now. So that's my insights about products.
Yeah, and as you can tell, you can be brilliant within different product environments. It's not like we're saying, well, you really got to move to business models. I thought I'd talk about expansion, and really the motivation behind expansion oftentimes is growth. We're operating within kind of this boundary here, but we're going to chase some growth that we think is achievable. And it's probably more known. Like, we know that it's out there and it's a gap that we have that we're going to chase. And so it could be a new channel in terms of how your product gets delivered or your service gets delivered. It could be a new category. It could be a new customer. It could be a new geography. And I thought we'd share 4 examples. FIFA. Everybody loves football or soccer around the world, as some of us in North America call it. FIFA has probably been one of the better leagues in terms of transitioning itself to, well, people love to play soccer online. So, new channel. They have an e-league where, millions of people compete to actually be the next Ronaldo, the next, Maradona, I guess, given recent headlines of the world. And so over the last 3 years, they've done a really good job of doing that. Disney, I could argue that's probably a business model change, but I think from how do you deliver something completely differently? You've taken all of your expertise in entertainment and done something completely different. Dyson is the king or queen, I guess, of moving into different product categories with new customers. And so, their Corral product, haven't used it before. I don't know if you have, Andrea, but it's a hair straightener. So if you are really good at knowing the technology behind good fans and air purifiers, chances are you might be able to turn that technology into something different and expand into a different world. And Huawei, in a high profile way, has taken its roots in China and geographically expanded to North America. And so that's maybe more of a high profile example of trying to find expansion geographically. I will turn it over to you for experience, Andrea.
Yeah, and we just asked the community to please chime in because Sean and I have our perspectives, but we are really looking, especially for the Future Proofing Awards next in a couple months, for other examples that really speak to these, because we that's what we're always trying to do, and would love to hear in the chat some other ideas of things that we should look at as well. So from an experience perspective, this is one where I have this new line, which is, boring can be beautiful. That's something that's super boring, first of all, can be hugely profitable and very important, but also having just been in Denmark, and they made fun of there was somebody from Lego that was making fun of the artists from Milan that come in with a beret and want to make, instead of blue and red Legos, they want to make purple Legos, and that's innovation, right? And that's there's more to it than that. So this is experience. And so service updates, new service introduction, optimized experience, radical new experience. And Sean and I love logistics innovation. We love backbone innovation, just because, it's not only products that are sexy. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll give some examples of boring being beautiful. We just did this really great think tank on the future of travel. And I don't know if Pete Como's here and Focusrite, but I'll give them a plug. They did a fantastic virtual conference. Yep. I mean, first class, fantastic. And we were very happy that the whole theme of it was future proofing. So no humility there. But anyway, one of the companies that we became attached to there, or aware of there, was Journera, like Journey with an ERA, to the point where they thought we worked for them. We do not, but this is not a paid endorsement. What they did is really boring. It sounds crazy, but speaking about, customer experience, instead of I'm your car company, by the way, get into the frame of mind. It's 2019 and we are traveling, because I know in 2020, none of this makes any sense. But imagine that we're in the world of 2019 and we have a rental car and we have a plane reservation and we have a hotel and we have a dinner and we have a meeting room and we have a conference and many people we have to interact with. Well, before, the experience was based on the individual vendors. And so what Journera did is boring and pretty basic, but we love it because as an experience, they flipped it. And they said, when Sean gets off a plane and it's late, there are 50 things that happen. He has to, tell people he's going to be late. He has to maybe change his presentation. He maybe has to change a hotel. He has to find a rental. There are all these things that have to happen. Well, Journera decided to be neutral, agnostic, and just create something from the traveler's perspective. So we love the fact that they took the experience and made it better for the traveler. TUI is the cruise to nowhere. And once again, I know there's someone in our community that's a big cruise person. I once, I did not invent this, but I once decided that why not just get on a ship and leave the dock, and then everybody where you came from changes costumes and learns and speaks a certain language. You come right back where you just were, and then you have like 5 city blocks of like some really cool place where they're speaking a certain language. You get back on the boat, you go somewhere, you come back, everybody's changed costumes, and it was called the boat to nowhere. Well, TUI has done that, only they've done it with COVID in mind, where imagine a place where you can have everyone 100% COVID tested, everything, kind of hermetically sealed so that you can feel very safe. And what they've done is they've created out of Singapore first, because there's some issues with certain ports that you can't do this, but they have cruises to nowhere. And supposedly they're, they kind of go nowhere, but then they do change the experience every time they either redock or have a theme on the ship. So we think that that's a really cool way of virtually traveling as a new experience-based innovation. And then the last thing is, well, there's a couple, but one is Rappi. And what they started off doing is delivering food, but wait, there's more. It was digital, it was physical, because during COVID, they also discovered that last mile is really important. You can get something to a warehouse, but the ability to get it to Andrea's house. So it's expanded both in terms of geography, and it's based on an experience where it's serving the end customer really, really well. And I won't go into all the other details, but from the payment side, there's a company called Pix. There's a Guatemalan company, an insurance tech called Osigu. And what they've done, same thing, is it's an experience of smoothing out some um, um, processes with regards to how payments were happening. And we think that it's something that can be applied cross industry, is to go digital, physical, and also to just take something really boring, think of the experience from the customer's perspective, and figure out what that journey is all about and smooth it all out and make it seamless. So we love all of these. Back to you, Sean.
Yeah, and I don't know where transformation fits on the scale of boring innovation, but having worked with some business process people in the past, I mean, there's a ton of sweat equity there, and sometimes their stuff isn't even recognized. So as much as I'll provide 4 high-profile examples of business transformation, transformation is innovation. Like sometimes we put them into 2 different buckets. They aren't. It's new. It's providing new value, whether it's internal or external. So whether it's a new process, internal integration, business process redesign, or complete business network redesign where your business is changed based on how you've configured your stuff, transformation plays a role in innovation. I've got 4 different examples here. One, we've seen nearly every single shopping mall, nearly every single retailer have to really get its act together in terms of curbside pickup for pandemic-based reasons. And so that is a fundamental shift in terms of, look, we are, ask any grocery retailer, there are legions of new people that they've had to hire to make sure this works. And so that's one example. Second example, it's very high profile, $27 billion. Salesforce just bought Slack last week. And so as much as that's the high profile thing, and wow, you think to yourself, I wonder what they're going to do with Slack. You know that Salesforce is going to have to integrate Slack into their world and actually create different intersections with different products that they have. And so once again, transformation based. I'm a big basketball fan, so apologize, Raptor fans, we didn't make it this year, but the NBA had to completely pivot to a situation where nearly half of their revenues that they were taking in were gate revenue. Well, guess what? You have no physical fans anymore. And so they were probably one of the better sports leagues in terms of completely pivoting to be in a bubble. So there was some security and safety-based things that they had to transform around, but also create an experience that from a television standpoint was, I would say it rivaled looking at a live game. So that was interesting. And Tesla has completely reinvented themselves from a transformation standpoint. Everybody thinks Tesla is great they produce radically new cars, or they do it from an energy focus, or they're bringing us into space. This one was just, they are showrooming all their cars. So you walk into a Tesla showroom, it's a complete pivot in terms of how car dealers and car manufacturers actually sell their product by just showing you and then not even creating any type of environment where it's like you can drive it off the lot. Like it's a separate situation altogether, and it's not a dealer-based network. So those are 4 high-profile examples of transformation-based, but we recognize there's a ton of work out there that may never, ever see the light of day from a consumer standpoint, but help in terms of building innovation. Andrea?
Well, I have to insert something from Robert Walton. Thank you so much. He just gave us a plug. Thank you, Bob. I just remembered that from the customer experience part. So a long time ago in a planet far, far away, when there was Compaq before it became HP, we led them a very interesting project in customer experience that was transforming the customer call centers. And he can take credit for this. It was, quote, boring in a great way, but was recognized by Good Housekeeping and CNET in terms of the level of improvement. And thank you. Yes, we did work together on that. So that was part of the foundation of thinking about it this way. And also this notion of data mining and analytics that created a shared language between the product engineers and the service folks. So those aren't the things that usually win awards, and we think they should. So we'll make sure to actually put things like that into our Futureproofing awards as well. So thanks for that, Bob. That's really a great reminder. And business model innovation. So let's go talk about, there's business model ventures, there's acquisition, there's business model addition, there's total pivots in business model. So let me give you a few examples of each of those. So there's a company I can't pronounce. I've been trying for 9 years since I met the founder. It means seasons in Danish, and it's Osluden. And they have just created, so what they are is a wonderful company that has organic and biodynamic farms. And it's the most amazing experience. I really recommend that everybody visit it. And for years, the people that we know, including Søren, who's one of the co-founders, had this great vision for delivering boxes of healthy food to people's doorsteps. Great. That would work in Denmark, not just so sure it would work in New York City or San Francisco. But anyway, nobody steals them, and it's healthy. And of course, it was the precursor to things like Blue Apron and other companies that came, but they were first. I mean, they really were pioneers. Well, this morning I saw that they're pioneers again, the business model-based innovation. They have started something called Planetary Impact Ventures. And what they've done is they've created now a fund for sustainable businesses and startups. And so it's super exciting to me that they've gone from being a business model that's based on their own model of delivering food and having a farm, and they do a lot of education, but to actually have a venture fund. And I think that people who know what they're doing like this and have the values in the right places, fantastic that they've gotten brave and done that. And then also Impossible Burgers, or the food group, the business model based innovation that they've got, which I just learned about through Robbie Baxter's book. She has a podcast that interviewed somebody from Impossible. So they worked with David Chang and Momofuku, and they have a whole way of having a business model where they're not just selling Impossible Burgers, but they're selling like the daily menu item. And so they're working really closely business to business and business to chef to create this craveable habit of replacing meat. And so the business model is, it's not just that they're selling product, but they're in collaboration and co-creation with chefs. And they have hundreds of them now in their program, and really excited about that business model innovation. And then there are a couple that go one-to-one. So let's go to the next one. There was a question about regulatory, and certainly medical regulation is a huge barrier for a lot of innovation, but lots of things in the United States have changed quickly. People who are physicians in state A are allowed to practice telemedicine in state B for the first time. That's temporary, but we think that it's probably going to happen as well. So that's a really good question around what happens in regulatory. And we see that a lot of business models in health have changed quickly. And the second thing that's regulated has been the banking sector. And so we were really struck by the fact that just this quarter, European fintech giant Revolut is close to applying for a bank charter in California. And that means that the regulation of the incumbents and the advantage is shifting. And then the next one is Chinese fintech Ant sidelines banks in distribution of funds targeting its IPO. And the quote is, "This is the first time that banks are being excluded from mutual fund sales." And so the way that the regulated markets, to Bob's question earlier, are having advantage or not, is all shifting, and incumbents don't necessarily have the upper hand. So that's a lot of excitement with regards to business models.
And the last part of our innovation spectrum is what we're calling ecosystem innovation. And as you can see from Andrea's business model innovation, a lot of times there's different partners involved, but there tends to be one rallying force that gets a platform pulled together, or pulls together these disparate parts and configures something different. With an ecosystem innovation, almost from the start, you cannot do this alone. You are not, in a lot of cases, going to be the center of that area of value. You're going to have to work and collaborate with other people from the get-go. So whether it's a partnership, an industry ecosystem, a regional one, or trying to tackle a global big challenge, these are examples of probably the newest form of innovation. And just an interesting known fact, if you looked at annual reports from a decade ago, I think we mentioned this in our last webcast, Andrea, the word ecosystem shows up 13 times more frequently in annual reports now than they did a decade ago, pointing to the fact that this truly is a new thing that's developed over the last decade. So on a very basic level, Nike decided, you know what, we don't do electronics that well. We better work with a partner that does. And so Nike's brand image meets Apple's ability to pull together things in a hardware and platform-based market. They produced a whole bunch of products together. Pretty much blockchain is built onto the foundation of, we're going to do things together, whether it's from a person in a decentralized way, or Hyperledger, where they've got networks and networks of different banks and fintechs and everybody operating under the same roof to hopefully have one standard. Little do we know that as much as we spend time on Zoom, it's actually a platform. It's an ecosystem that's actually helping others make money off of their platform. So it's an app-based system that, I was less aware of this, but certainly as I've got more into how do we get interesting engagement online, Zoom is kind of an ecosystem unto itself. And then finally, probably in 2020, the most prevalent example is COVAX, and just how 172 countries have pulled together and tried to grab an oar and try to figure out how do we wrestle this thing called COVID-19 to the ground. And so it's probably one of the best examples of World Health Organization building a whole network of people under one roof as an ecosystem. So, Andrea, this is like, we could write another book in 2021 based on just codifying innovation differently. What have we learned today before we pivot to our audience over the last few minutes?
We're all about being actionable. And so we love models, but what we really love is when people just use this kind of framework to get more open-minded and to realize that the research is in our favor, that what we're trying to do is inspire everybody to open our minds. So look at the models with a sense of appetite for change and confidence that others have done it. And also, we're really building a community. So I think that my round the horn for today is how cool it is to remember some of the projects that we've done with some of the people in the community. And we're really trying to apply these. So 2021 is all about applying these, doing sprints. We have a new way of getting people to absorb them and apply them, absorb and apply with the emphasis on apply. So to me, that's what I learned the most. And it was actually great. And it was great to have all the feedback from the audience and the participants. Back to you, Sean.
Well, I think my only learning today is like, sometimes I take my small Canadian approach and go, wow, well, here's something that we're offering to you. Maybe you can build upon it. I think we're really onto something here, Andrea, and we're inviting our community to actually, provide us the great examples in Futureproofing Awards. We're going to train people how to do this well. And so maybe I'll quickly inform people of what's coming up next as a preview of that. And then we've probably got 2 or 3 minutes left. So we might be able to see some questions come in from chat. We are launching in Oceania. Sometimes we don't know how to pronounce Oceania. Sometimes we don't know what countries are in Oceania. Essentially, this is Australia, New Zealand, and a whole bunch of different island countries that we want to actually get our book out to. And that's coming up, depending on time of day and where you are in the world, December 16th and 15th. Our last webcast of the year. I can't believe we've done 24 of these, Andrea.
Oh, I'm so sad. It's the last one of the year.
This one's an open riff, and maybe we'll actually invite some of the people online, because really we don't have many slides on this one. This is going to be trying to inform people where we think the next 5 years is going, and the end of the year tends to be a good thing. We'll do that.
By the way, I'm thinking we need Greg Sittel and Bob on this one. I just feel like we need to give Greg certainly some attention since we sort of left him off of that book list.
No matter by hook or by crook, whether we do stuff here or in our guild life, Greg gets greater share of attention than he's offing off. In January, we are introducing the Futureproofing Award, so Bob and Greg will hopefully be our honorary judges on that. And we're going to try to identify the best that do future-proofing in 16 different categories. And then finally, we're previewing this week. So if you ask us nicely enough, we'll get you into our little alpha session or whatever in terms of people. But come February 26th, we're going to take this into a training curriculum, and hopefully not just leave it as our argument to the world, but actually get people to use our tools and actually get them to work it inside their own companies as a skill set. So, Andrea, that's the announcements, but we have a couple minutes left. Do we want to, I don't know if anything's come in through chat that bears.
Yeah, there's a couple questions I'll bring out, but I'll also let us close as well. I don't want the concept of future-proofing you to go as just one slide. We are so committed to sharing this. We have really, Sean and I have really worked this through. We've been spending months doing field testing, some of us in the community here. We've, blood, sweat, and tears trying to figure out what it really means. How do you create innovation that companies can take to the bank? How do you deliver on that promise? How do you do it at scale? And so we are super excited. We've seen everybody else do online courses, and we decided, okay, what's the kind that we want to do? And so we have a showcase, a VIP showcase on Thursday, and then we're starting it, in February of 2021. We'll be offering the virtual Future-Proofing You, and it's super excited. So it's not a small thing to us at all. And one of the questions was about how this works cross-industry. And so I think the final one before we sign off officially is, Sean, what are your thoughts about that? How would one industry, retail, healthcare, high tech, B2B, rich technology backgrounds, highly regulated, fintech. What's your sense about how various industries might apply these thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think it's agnostic. I don't think we went into it thinking, oh, this is for SaaS companies to do. No. And if you look at the real live examples out there, Andrea, I think it'd probably be great actually to have our community invest some time with us to actually build the best case examples out there. Because I guarantee you, you look at the top 25 industries around the world, we'll find something in each one of our 24 types. We will. And so that's something I want. Like, there isn't like this exclusive domain that only digital companies perform well in these areas. Every single industry does. I think in certain industries, it means being a little bit bolder in your perspective than your peer set. Because I know in other webcasts, Andrew, we've talked about to compare yourself to the best performer within your own industry is really a recipe for failure, isn't it? Right? It's funny, in a month where Tony C has died from Zappos at a point in time clearly set the standard for customer experience. So even though you might have been the best car rental company out there that created the best customer experience for car rentals, pretty much people were dissatisfied with car rentals, weren't they? Like, it took somebody like Zappos to come along and go, and look, you know what, if the customer complains, they're right, send their product back or whatever, and just a whole bunch of different things that people have copycatted over the last decade. So I would say you can learn a lot from cross-industry. Nothing is specific to an industry that doesn't fall into our 24 camps. And usually, as a starting point for innovation for me, we have this other model called the aperture model, where we look at 6 different types of things that look like your situation, and typically those fall in cross industry as a starting point for innovation. Anything to add, Andrea?
No, not at all. And I'm going to wrap us up because we are at the top of the hour. But the most important thing is how much we really appreciate the community, whether it's the podcast, whether it's the live, or whether it's the after hours feedback. And we really would love for you to communicate with us at Futureproofing NEXT so that we can hear from you some ideas in each of these areas where it's always a living document. So please feed us your feedback. And thank you so much for being part of Season 2, Episode 23, The New Frame of Innovation Plus Plus. And we will see you in the future.
Bye now.